Hello there, my name is Daniel Bobinski, and you are listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast. This is episode number 6, and we have no major columns to release today, but we do have our 5 and 15. So we try to cover 5 topics in 15 minutes. So I have to tell you, I don't think I'm going to be able to maintain a 15-minute limit on this one today. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. Again, my name is Daniel Bobinski. I'll be your host on this adventure. And thank you for tuning in to the New Book of Daniel podcast. There is an old Book of Daniel, by the way. He doesn't have a podcast, but you can go read that in this book we call the Bible, and it's very informative. So I do recommend you do that. But the New Book of Daniel here today is talking about the news and the issues of the day, the foundations of our society. And I got 5 topics. I try to cover 5 topics in 15 minutes. Like I said, I don't think I'm going to cover, I'm going to limit this to 15 minutes today. Just a lot to cover. So, and I'm not even going to spend that much time on the impeachment. Oh my gosh, a lot of impeachment stuff out there, but I'll just briefly touch on that. First thing up is we're going to talk about Virginia, because on Martin Luther King Day this week, we had the Second Amendment rally, where we had over 20,000 people walking around with their guns around the Capitol building. Of course, you had that little section out front where you couldn't carry a gun because of the governor's state of emergency and his fear and people not wanting to get shot and, and all that stuff. Well, these law-abiding citizens. But they had a gun rally. And of course, we had this guy named, he's a delegate. He's in the House there at Virginia, in the state of Virginia. House Delegate Lee Carter is in the news at the Washington Free Beacon saying that the gun rights rally was terrorism. Did you hear that? Terrorism. Josh Christensen penned this article that he's by the way, this Lee Carter guy is the House Delegate, self-professed Democratic socialist, accused participants in Monday's peaceful protest of menacing lawmakers, saying the thousands of idiots who demonstrated would only embolden the Democratic majority on gun control. He said, quote, "The pro-gun people that terrorized Richmond probably didn't realize all they did was tag team with fascists and strengthen the liberals' resolve to pass gun control bills and force the most gun-friendly Dem, me," meaning himself, to not show up for work for a day. Idiots, absolute idiots. Okay, let's just break that down real fast. Mr. Carter, first of all, you call yourself a gun-friendly Democrat, but yet you're a self-professed Democratic socialist. Which is it? I think you're probably going to be the Democratic socialist. And we all know that the Democratic is just like ice sprinkles on a turd. So you're just a socialist. All right, so you're a socialist and you're gun-friendly, and yet you're too afraid to show up at the Capitol. I don't think you're all that gun-friendly. Either that or you're terrified of people who want to stand up for their rights and just tell you about it because you don't have a good answer for it. That's my take on your thing. All right, let's move on, because number 2 on the list is right after the protest there on Monday. What does the Virginia State House do? They pass red flag gun control laws. Right now, it is now illegal. They're moving forward to it to make it to where they can just come into your house and confiscate your guns in violation of due process laws. And so here's Senator George Barker from the state of Virginia, 39th district, saying similar bills have reduced the deaths in several states, particularly suicides, and have also been used in several situations of threats of mass shootings. And I say, based on what evidence? I mean, what might have been prevented? What may have been prevented? Because that's all we see is when I go to look this up, I went to CNN, found a nice article on red flag laws and how valuable they are. And all I see is might have prevented and may have prevented. Because when it comes to actual reduction in suicides, it's not happening. Sorry. There's an Indiana professor that they're quoted in the CNN article. His name is Aaron Kivisto, assistant professor of clinical psychology. And he said, in Connecticut, non-firearm suicides rose when the red flag laws were enforced. In other words, when they took away the guns, people who killed themselves without a gun went up. The reduction in suicide by guns and the increase in suicides by other means made it almost a wash. So there was a wash. if people want to take themselves out, they're going to take themselves out. So the red flag law, all it just means is we're not going to kill ourselves with a gun. We're going to use some other means. And then as far as red flag laws having an effect on homicide rates, the good professor says certainly more research is needed because there's been no published research on this. So in other words, they're full of malarkey. So we have officers trying to enforce these measures who are going to get hurt as they try to enforce them. This is not good for our society. Red flag laws are unconstitutional. I really wish we could just do away with them. So I wish somebody would file a lawsuit against them because they should just be gone. Lastly, on Virginia, introduced this week, House Bill 1627 by Delegate Jeffrey M. Bourne. I'm sure no relation to Jason. Going to criminalize, it's a criminal offense if you criticize a government official. That's what it is. House Bill 1627, you can look it up. Language in the bill explicitly criminalizes free speech in what would constitute a blatant attack on the First Amendment. This is from bigleaguepolitics.com. Shane Trejo, it looks like, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is the name of the author of this piece. And this is the verbiage under legislation. It says, if any person with the intent to coerce, intimidate, or harass any person shall use a computer or computer network to communicate obscene, vulgar, profane, lewd, lascivious, or indecent language, or make any suggestion or proposal of an obscene nature, or threaten any legal or immoral act, he's guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. I got a question for you. Who defines harassment? If I get on my computer and I type on Twitter, gee, I think Governor Northam's got a really bad haircut today. All of a sudden, maybe he'd take that personally and I'm harassing him. And then all of a sudden I'm guilty of a misdemeanor and I'm can be convicted of a crime. I love the fact that we have Republican delegate Nick Freitas. His wife Tina got on Facebook and she said, and I quote, "Wow, on cue. Now they're after the First Amendment. Dems are trying to set up special rules exclusive to the elite ruling class to protect them from criticism, protect themselves from criticism." In other words, it's going to criminalize any dissent against a public official. Governor, a lieutenant governor, a judge, member of the House. This whole thing kind of reminds me of Animal Farm, right? If you read the book or saw the movie, you know that all the animals, it's a takeoff on communism and how communism overthrows capitalism. And all the animals are going to be equal, right? And the pigs are in charge. They put themselves in charge and they go move into the guy's house. And pretty soon we end up with all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And I look at that and go, that's exactly what's happening in Virginia. This Tina Freitas, bless her heart, this is awesome. I just am so grateful for her tweet or her Facebook post. She says, what is considered harassment? That was my question. What's considered harassment? And then she says, is Governor Infanticide / KKK Hood trying to avoid being held accountable? Sounds like it to me. Are we no longer allowed to demand justice for the alleged rape victims of LG Fairfax? This is some straight up communist censorship. And I agree with her. Just a day after the gun rally, they did this. So what we have happening in Virginia is some sheriffs thinking about making citizens deputies, just deputize these people so they can have their guns. I penned an article last week called "Virginia Governor is Not a Patriot." And I'm sure I'm going to have people telling me, how dare you call his patriotism into question? And I'm going to say, I dare just fine. Because you go back to the Revolutionary War, we had patriots and loyalists. Loyalists wanted England to be in charge. Patriots believed something else. They believed that rights come from God, not from the government, right? That political power comes from the will of the governed. That our government should be a representative republic because they know just straight democracy leads to mob rule. And that our government should only have a limited amount of power. And that our government shouldn't be able to take away rights because it's not government that gives the rights. God gives the rights. You believe these things, you are a patriot. This is what the patriots believed. It's the principles upon which our Constitution was written. Governor Northam does not agree with these. He doesn't. He thinks he's in charge. The rights come from the government and he can take them away any way he wants. And I just say, Governor, if you want to come back and be a patriot, come back and subscribe to this. Stop being the bully there in Virginia. You can do better. I got faith in you. It's up to you. All right, let's move on to number 2. 2 of my 5 here. Try to keep us within 15 minutes. Like I said, I don't think it's going to happen today. But number 2 on my list is kind of a sad thing. 47 years ago, yesterday was Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court. 60 million people didn't make it out alive. 60 million Americans were killed, dismembered, burned in the womb. I look at that and say, you know, there's a lot of artists there that could have created some really cool stuff. Probably some scientists that could have invented some really cool things and discovered some really cool things and some cures to different diseases. Some inventors that could have invented some things. People that could have been taking care of other people that didn't get to be born because a Supreme Court decision. I want to take you back in time to 1857, March 6th, when the Supreme Court of the United States said that Mr. Dred Scott was property. He was a slave. He belonged to a doctor who moved to Illinois and then Wisconsin, which were free states. And Dred Scott decided, since he was in a free state, that he should be free. And this thing ended up going to court, worked its way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had 5 justices from the South and 1 very pro-slavery justice from the state of Virginia, that's where he lived, Robert Greer. And the Chief Justice, when this was passed, they wrote that Dred Scott was property, not a person. They did not recognize him as a person. Just because his owner lived in a free state, that didn't make him a person. He was still property. And then, because of due process, that he could not be taken from a person, couldn't escape. He belonged to somebody. And 4 years later, the Civil War kicked off because Southern states were emboldened by the Dred Scott decision. They said, you know what? If slaves are property, then what are you trying to tell us what we can and can't do because of due process laws? So it emboldened them to start the Civil War. And I think that the Dred Scott decision was right to be overturned. I hope you do too, right? Slavery is evil. People look at the Bible and say, well, there's slavery in the Bible. Not the way that we had slavery in America. I don't have time to go into it with this particular podcast. Maybe I'll do it on a separate podcast. We'll talk about what slavery was in the Bible, because the people for years used the Bible as a proof of slavery, and people in the South did too. But they didn't understand how the word slave was used back then. It's kind of like today. If I said, hey, do you have a fag? You'd be thinking that I'm asking, do you have someone who's homosexual? But 60 years ago, if I said, hey, do you have a fag? You'd hand me a cigarette, because the word fag in 1950s meant a cigarette. So yeah, words change, even in 60 years' time. So I'm glad the Dred Scott decision got overturned. It was bad law. The Supreme Court said it was law, right? Oh, the Supreme Court said it was law. And 47 years ago, the Supreme Court said that it was legal to kill people in the womb. I think it's time to overturn that and get back to some real stuff. All right, let's move on to another sad story. Number 3, this breaks my heart. This is Nigeria, where Islamicists from Boko Haram have beheaded Mr. Reverend Lawan Andimi because he would not renounce his Christian faith and call himself a Muslim. 3 days ago, Reverend Dennis Baguri was shot. They entered his home in the middle of the night and they shot him. The leader of Boko Haram Abu Bakr Shiku is the leader of Boko Haram. He wants Nigeria to be free of Christians and ruled by Sharia law. Sharia law is the Islamic law. Mr. Bush says that Islam was a religion of peace. Oh, are they? We have these people being killed. There's 200 million people that live in Nigeria, according to the reports. In recent years, entire Christian villages have been wiped out by jihadists of Boko Haram and the Fulani. Media reports these as simple clashes between Muslims and Christians. Some are reporting them as clashes between farmers and herdsmen. Kind of hard to say it's just clashes when one side is doing the attacking and the other side is doing all the dying. When the one side is doing the attacking and the other side is having their houses of worship burned down. Over 900 churches have been burned to the ground in Nigeria in the past 3 years. You know, it makes front page news here in America when one church, one house of worship gets burned or spray painted with swastikas or whatever. If we have 5 of those a year, we think it's horrible. 900 churches in the past 3 years burned. Over 15,000 Christians slaughtered by Islamicists. Now, I need to do a little bit of apology because the other day on my podcast, I said, if you want to learn more about Islam, go to YouTube and find any video by, I said, Roger Federer. I misspoke. Roger Federer does not know much about Islam, I'm sure. He's a tennis player. He knows how to hit that ball. But Mr. William Federer has a lot of videos on Facebook. So that's who I want you to go look up is William Federer. Anything by him on Facebook having to do with Islam is going to inform you like you wouldn't believe. Fantastic presentations. But in essence, just in a nutshell, if you're a Muslim, if you're Islamic, you believe, you are taught that every person born on the face of the earth is born as a Muslim. This is Islamic belief. And that if you are not a practicing Muslim, then you are in rebellion to Allah. And therefore you deserve to die because you will not convert. That's why they want you to convert. They want you to say, hey, convert, denounce your Christianity, or we're going to behead you, because they think they are giving honor to Allah by destroying you because you are in rebellion to Allah. If you doubt me on this, go watch Federer's videos, and he's got a whole lot more proof on it than I do. But it's horrific what's happening in Nigeria. I think Nigerians would like to see an envoy from the White House. Back during the Bush administration, they sent, who was it? Senator John Danforth went over as a special envoy to the Sudan when they were having similar problems. And he was able to negotiate some stuff and get stuff ironed out. And we've had these clashes. I think we need to do something more than just talk about it as clashes between Muslims and Christians. We need to do something a little more there. You know what? We had the Obama administration bringing in all these Muslim refugees, and then he was planting them in conservative small towns. And again, these Muslim refugees do not want to assimilate. The majority of them do not want to assimilate. Not all of them, some do, but the majority of them don't. That's why you have all these, look at this, what happened in Minnesota and Michigan, and even in New York, you have these, they look like police cars with Sharia enforcement driving around, making sure that you're wearing a head covering. This is happening in America right now. Why don't we bring in some Christian refugees from Nigeria, and why don't we put them in blue states? Hey, Mr. Trump, what a great idea. Let's play Obama's game. All right. Number 4 on my list. Moving on here. I want to go back to an article I wrote for Uncover DC back, I think in October, in which I said the journalists, our mainstream media, the legacy media, because they're not going to be mainstream for long. They are fading fast. But they are journalists in name only. They're really the propaganda machine or the public relations department for the Democratic Party. Democratic Marxist Socialist Party. And Mr. Chuck Todd from Meet the Press made the news. his first read from his briefing from Meet the Press on the NBC political unit. They put this thing out. This is going back here a couple of days by Chuck Todd, Mark Murray, and Carrie Dan. And it starts off, it sure looks like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is going to ram through an incredibly speedy impeachment trial, which could result in President Trump's acquittal by as early as next week. What piece of news. I don't think that Chuck Todd and company said that Nancy Pelosi was rushing through an impeachment. 48 days, was it? When it took like 5 years for Ken Starr to go through and find out what was going on with Bill Clinton. Anyways, I move on here. So remember I said now, these Democrats, these Democratic reporters, because we know that 90% of Washington, D.C. reporters vote Democrat and donate to to Democratic causes. So yeah, I think it's fair to say, Chuck, here, just reading this guy is a Democrat cheerleader. We're going to get him some pom-poms and a little pleated skirt. But he says, so why haven't the Democrats tried to pressure GOP senators, especially in the months since the House passed their impeachment articles against Trump? Democrats might have the overall facts on their side, and they have a slight majority of Americans supporting Trump's conviction and removal, according to yesterday's CNN poll. But they've yet to make life miserable for the Cory Gardners, Martha McSally's, and Susan Collinses, and that makes it much easier for Mitch McConnell to win on process. Oh, he might win on process. And come on, cheerleaders, come on, Democrats, you can go out there and make life miserable for these vulnerable Republicans. You can do it. Pom-poms, pleated skirts for Chuck Todd. Yay. Number 5 on my Fast 5 and 15. Going over today, Joe Biden's conspiracy theory memo to the U.S. media doesn't match the facts. This is from John Solomon, and I strongly encourage you to read this, especially if you have any interest in facts. JohnSolomonReports.com. That's where you can find this. And he links to a Biden for President press release, 2 reporters and editors. This is from Kate Beldingfeld, Deputy Campaign Manager and Communications Director, Tony Blinken, Senior Advisor. Tony Blinken, not A. Blinken. Is he Blinken? Anyways, this is hilarious to read. It is so anti-Trump. It's just Trump guilty, Trump guilty, Trump guilty, Trump guilty. And it says here, all these accusations that Trump has made against Biden are false. So remember this whole Ukrainian thing where Trump was saying, we need to look into this Biden situation. So this press release to reporters and editors says virtually every major media organization has definitively debunked this accusation. And again, he's going through with more and more accusations, unsubstantiated, no evidence, yada, yada, yada. Fact checkers across the mainstream media have had a field day with this conspiracy theory. For example, the New York Times fact-checking team writes that Biden's actions were in line with U.S. policy. In other words, defend Biden, New York Times. Who'da thunk? And then the Associated Press says it's incorrect to say that Biden had pressed the prosecutor, yada, yada. And the Washington Post fact-checker has also weighed in many times, that blah, 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 blah. And in a deep dive, the Los Angeles Times found blah, 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 blah. And then just more and more Trump guilty, Biden innocent. And then we get to the back and it says, but to fail to make clear that the conspiracy theory and false accusations about Joe Biden have been comprehensively disproven is to make you an enabler of misinformation. Well, Joe, count me among those who is an enabler of misinformation by your definition. But as far as I know, we have had no official charges against you yet, no federal investigation into your crimes or your son's crimes, or I'm sorry, alleged crimes. I'll be respectful to you for that. There's been no investigation into your alleged crimes or your son's alleged crimes, just media poking around. And we all know how straightforward the media is, right? I mean, we go to Amy Robach at ABC News with her Epstein story. We know how much the media wants to tell the truth in that. And then we can go to Cheryl Atkinson with CBS News and CNN, and she'll tell you all about the straightforward perspective of the media elite. And you keep saying all this stuff is false, false, false. Well, I love that John Solomon here on his page against johnsolomonreports.com. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 facts that in your article you say are falsehoods. He says, nope, this is fact. Nope, this is fact. Nope, this is fact. And I'm just going to encourage you to go to John Solomon's reports to read them all. But Joe Biden, I'm not going to be so polite. I think you're a liar. Yeah. We have this polite way of saying this stuff now that we mischaracterized something or we misspoke. I'm not going down that politically correct road. Joe Biden, you and your team are liars because these facts are in place and your team is saying they didn't go in place. You're saying none of this happened? It happened. We have the facts. So for me to say that this is a theory and to say it's something that it's an accusation that should still be investigated by our courts of law does not make me an enabler of misinformation. It makes me a fact finder. And I'm going to stand on that, and that's how I'm going to close. Because I am tired of left-wing people defining the argument. You, sir, are a liar. You stood by that man there in Iowa, and you said he was a damn liar for just bringing up the accusation. There's been no court of law here, Joe. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm done. You've been listening to the New Book of Daniel podcast with your host, Mr. Daniel Bobinski. If you'd like to get a hold of me, send me an email. Have any comments about the show, any questions, anything you'd like me to address, just reach me at newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. newbookofdaniel@outlook.com. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's at newbookofdaniel. And I tweet several times a day, keep track of stuff out there. And I also got a blog that you can go to. I don't blog very often, but it's the newbookofdaniel.com blog. It's just newbookofdaniel.com. And of course, you can follow my political writings. A lot of my big articles, are carried over on uncoverdc.com. uncoverdc.com, where you can find my stuff. And if you want to read all my stuff, you go to the little search bar up in the top hand right corner, and you just type in my last name, Bobinski, Bobinski, and you can find all the articles that I've written there. And of course, like I said, if you want to support the podcast, heaven forbid, please, if you want to find out how my business can help your business, go to myworkplaceexcellence.com. That's myworkplaceexcellence.com. One-on-one coaching, team training, emotional intelligence stuff, different assessments, DISC assessments, cognitive style, motivator assessments. Find out about yourself. Learn about emotional intelligence, self-management, work management, relationship management, become better, more effective, more profitable. That's what I've been doing for 30 years over there, but that's how you can support the podcast. This is the New Book of Daniel podcast. I am Daniel Bobinski. We will catch you next time. Have a great day.